Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today, I hope we have an exhilarating episode for you. I know you have a topic that I'm excited about. I don't know if you'll be excited about mine. I think mine's interesting.
I actually have no idea what you're going to cover because you went back and forth with a couple of ideas, and then I think you abandoned the one you told me. So I'm curious to see what it winds up being for sure.
Yeah.
So what are you going to be covering this episode, Robin?
I'm going to be covering a mysterious death of someone who I'll get into. You guys already know. You read the title. Adam will know after this.
Right on. I'm going to be covering Stigmata this episode, which is definitely something that we've kind of dabbled into a little bit here and there depending on the topics we were covering, but I figured it was about time to just go and cover the whole thing. So yeah, that's going to be some exciting stuff, I hope. It's been a pretty solid week so far. If you hear growling and barking in the background, just deal with it. That's Anya. She's in the studio. That's what she does. She's upset because we're talking to you and we're not talking to her. But yeah, it's been a little bit of a busy week for us, but at the same time, I think overall it's been pretty okay, right?
Yeah, it's a good week. Definitely a good week of baking bread. Lots of
Robin got a sourdough starter, that sourdough cult she was talking about last episode.
Yeah, I am now a member of this sourdough cult. I'm so excited.
It's been going well. You've been making some good bread. I got out my panini press. I haven't used it in years. Having just amazing sandwiches, which has been super cool. So that's been fun. You got a bunch of Patreon rewards sent out for folks too. So Stampgate is hopefully officially over. Big bonehead move on my part, but I think we had enough in the reserves to take care of everyone. Speaking of Patreon rewards, it is January, and you know what that means. It's the final week of January Patreon push.
Why do you have to make the most annoying noises?
Because I know that air horn annoys you more than pretty much anything else. So it is January Patreon push, which means we take an extra step out of our episode to let you know to go over to patreon.com/Scaryish podcast. Anya's trying to tell you as well in the background if you can hear it. If you go over there, you can find our Patreon. It is set up to start out at tiers low as $1, which is super low. She's excited for the savings. For $1, you get ad-free episodes. You also get early access to all episodes that release. Sometimes the early access is not by a lot, but still, the ad-free is 100% a thing that you can get for $1, which is a pretty small amount of money. It's $4 for a month, which is pretty dope.
Yeah.
And then it goes up from there. We have $3 tiers, $10 tiers, with $25 tiers, and it's been nice to see so many folks join up for Patreon. It's meant so much to see January Patreon push works, that you folks are listening, that you want to contribute and help us keep the podcast moving forward. I don't have any major announcements to make or anything fun like that, but we do have some stuff in the works, and it's a direct correlation to the fact that January Patreon push has been successful. We also ran into something the other night, which was a little bit difficult and challenging that, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we did have to spend some money, and it's directly related to the fact that we've built this thing over 5 years, and we want to make sure we're going to keep it moving forward. And we're like, damn, this is going to incur some costs.
Oh, yes.
I'm just going to say it. Like, we were informed by one of our listeners that someone is using Robin's sign out. And we're just like, that's a little bit weird because, like, that's very specific to our show.
We've been using it for 5 years.
We have a ton of merch with it. And we're just like, I guess we should have trademarked that. And we're just like, oh, wait, we still can because it's still available. So we went ahead and trademarked Keep On Creeping On. It hasn't gone through all the paperwork, and we got all that stuff submitted. It hasn't been approved yet, but it's something we were able to look at and say, this is going to cost us some money, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, it's like we have some money saved up because we have folks who have donated via Patreon, or they've gone over to the other various places that they can donate. Some people sign up for Twitch and they subscribe there, which is always nice. There's different places that you can go, like Ko-fi, ko-fi.com, where you can send a one-time donation. It doesn't have to be something that's recurring, and those things have definitely helped out. So thank you to everyone who has signed up for January Patreon push.
We could not be here without all of you that have supported us over the past 5 years. So you guys are awesome.
Yeah, it's been really amazing. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We have some fun stuff we're working on for the very near future. Hopefully in February, we're going to release some extra content for you guys. I watched some stuff during my work day when I'm like sitting down and going through like tickets and stuff like that. And there was a few things I saw that other people did for their Patreon pushes, whatever they call them respectively, and they were really fun. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, we didn't set like goals for like if we get to this many, because we've had the 150 patron goal. of going to the Stanley Hotel. But I was like, like as a thank you, I think we should toss out some extra stuff. And Robin and I have definitely talked about a couple of things that we're going to try and get in the works here in the very near future. So just keep an ear out for that. Anya's super excited. So we post a lot of pictures of her too. So if you want to check out our doggos, go to Instagram, and at Scaryish Podcast is where you can find us. But all right, cool. That is the January Patreon push stuff. Thank you all so much for making this another successful January for us.
Anya also thanks you.
Indeed.
It gets her lots of treats.
Yeah, it is 12:02 a.m. and this dog is still like, why are you guys not paying attention to me? She has turned into like the best cuddling dog on the bed, which I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. But man, is she just like, she's like, stop giving away all my information. She's just super cute. She's a great corgi. We're very lucky. And we have an amazing Shiba that just sleeps next to us while we record now too. So pretty awesome. But yeah, all right. That's the maintenance stuff. You want to housekeeping stuff? You want to move into the topics? At this point?
Why don't you get us started?
Okay, cool. If the dog continues to bark or becomes disruptive, we will ask her to leave the office. We will escort her out. So I am going to go ahead and move into my topic though. So this week, I knew I didn't want to cover true crime. Sometimes when you go into a script, you're like, I'm not sure what I want to do. Sometimes you're like, I have a very specific genre in mind. The one thing I knew is I did not want to cover true crime because last week was very true crime heavy and it was some brutal details. I really wanted to cover something that's lighthearted and fancy-free, something that wouldn't be controversial or dip into any topics that people could get upset about if not interpreted or reported on correctly. So obvious, I thought, let's go Catholic this episode. JK. LOL. But for cereal, yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
But yeah, my topic is something that is primarily associated with Roman Catholicism, although it is also known outside of that, but I'll get to that in my script. This week, I am covering Stigmata. So first and foremost, I want to say that in no way, shape, or form am I trying to offend anyone by covering this. Secondly, if you feel the need to tweet at me regarding something I said that upset you, type it out, proofread it, make sure it's what you want to say, print it out, and shove it up your ass.
Oh my God.
I'm just kidding. But seriously, don't get upset. My goal is to educate on what stigmata is and then cover some of the more notable stigmata occurrences. I'm just going to toss in jokes here and there, nothing to upset people. So just come along for the ride, take off your serious hats. If you're super religious, you probably don't listen to Scaryish anyways, but maybe this isn't the episode for you. But just keep in mind, this is all done out of the goodness of my heart. So, all right. Anyways, a long time ago, there was this con man named Jesus Christ. Okay?
Oh my God.
Wait, what? That's too shitty? Okay, that's too shitty. Let me bring it down a bit. Take two. Here we go. So around 2,000 years ago, there was this cult named Christianity. Okay?
Okay.
Don't get upset. I'm saying that because that's kind of what they were thought of and treated like back in the day. And that's not wrong. And let me rephrase that. That's not inaccurate. The established order that was around 2,000 years ago saw this new religion that was forming as something that needed to be addressed. And I mean, a lot of you guys probably know this story. At that time, Jesus was still alive and kicking and profiting. Get it? He was a prophet.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Got it.
Nailed it. But eventually some folks, they decided that they're going to execute Jesus. And they did that. And we've talked about this before when we covered magical artifacts, because there are a couple of artifacts that are attached to that specific event.
We've done the Spear of Destiny, I think, right?
We have indeed. So to say Jesus' execution sucked, objectively speaking, when it comes to the details of what he went through, would be putting it mildly. It was pretty rough. I'm not going to give you a super detail, in-depth play-by-play. I think Mel Gibson did that back in the day, so if you're looking to see it, go watch Passion of the Christ. Or watch another Jim Caviezel movie, who is the person who played Jesus in Passion of the Christ, if you didn't know, called Frequency. It's a really fun movie. It's got Dennis Quaid.
Frequency is good.
I love that movie. So anyways.
Even the show. I know you don't like the show.
I haven't seen it because it doesn't have Jim Caviezel in it. Anyways, I bring all this up because the wounds that Christ suffered during his execution are quite specific wounds. They're very well known. And stigmata is the sudden and unexplained appearance of bodily wounds, scars, the pain, or blood in locations that correspond to the crucifixion wounds of Jesus Christ. I imagine most of you have heard of the fact that Jesus was crucified and some of the details to his crucifixion, but I'm just going to hit the high points, basically. I'll detail the big ones.
Is that supposed to be another, kind of like, not a double entendre, but like...
I didn't mean for it to be, so if you took it that way, that was not my intention. But One of the things that comes up with stigmata are bloody spots on your forehead as if you've been poked with needles across your forehead. Jesus was given a crown of thorns to wear while they did this to him, which, like, we can all say objectively, it's a fucking dick move. Like, here, wear this crown of thorns before we kill you. It's like, it's going to hurt you really bad. Like, you're assholes. The other wounds that are present are the big ones. These are the ones that are known, this is true, as the 5 holy wounds, or the 5 sacred wounds, or the 5 precious wounds. Those are all 3 names they're known by. The most recent iterations being the 5 fire wounds, or the 5 lit wounds.
No way.
Obviously not.
Oh, okay.
Just trying to figure out what sacred, precious, and holy would be in like today's parlance, and that's what I came up with. Those 5 wounds are as follows: 2 holes, 1 on each hand, 2 holes, 1 on each feet, representing where Jesus was nailed to the cross.
You mean 1 on each foot?
Feet, foot, whatever. Quick side note, Jesus was said to have been nailed to the cross with 9-inch nails, which is where that band got their name, in case you did not know that. I remember how pissed people were when they formed and got famous. Like, I can't believe how sacrilegious that name is. And I was like, this music's kind of fucking sweet. But anyways, moving forward, the 5th and final sacred, holy, precious, fire lit wound would be the lance mark from where he was stabbed in his side.
That's a new one for me.
Yeah, and that is one. That's the 5th one, and that, of course, is he was stabbed by Longinus, which we learned in the Spear of Destiny episode 243. So you can go check that out.
I had no idea that was one of them, because for me growing up, it was always like hands and feet. That was it. I didn't realize that, that was also one, but it makes sense.
There's also things that pop up that aren't like the specific ones. Like the Crown of Thorns to me is one that I've seen a lot in like documentaries about stigmata. There's also things about like the wrists and being bound. There's other things as well as like there's a lot of steps in the crucifixion that happened, but he was basically put to a post and then flogged. And a lot of the wounds on his back can tend to pop up.
Okay.
If you're like, what's that like? I would say go watch Da Vinci Code, because Paul Bettany self-flagellates in that movie. And that's something to simulate the pain that Jesus Christ went through, where he takes a whip and he's just hitting himself while he's naked.
Yeah.
And it's really gross. So, all right, cool.
Are you sure it's gross?
I mean,
Not hot.
It can be both. Okay. Like, don't judge my boners. So, all right.
Okay. So I think that's pretty interesting. Like the hands versus wrist thing. 'Cause like I have seen, things where it's like they're bleeding from their wrists, not necessarily the palms of their hands. And there is like that controversy, right? Where did they nail him in the wrist, or did they nail him in his hand?
Yeah, where exactly does the nail go? Was it a cross or was it a post? Like stuff like that. Fairly largely irrelevant details people use to try and drive a wedge between sects of Christianity. But I think that's good. Like, religion lesson over. We don't want to get too in depth with that. That's definitely not the type of podcast we are. But it's important for you all to know, what the wounds are that are associated with stigmata. Now you know what stigmata is. Now you know where it comes from. Now you know what it looks like. So, when does it happen? Well, stigmata is normally associated with individuals who have lived a life of heroic virtue. Just something I wasn't that aware of. Like, I knew that it's kind of a sign of being like touched by divinity and is often seen in saints, but I wasn't sure if it would be something where it had to be someone who was like pure, that it happened to, or if it just popped up on whoever, but that is what it's said to be. But let's step away from the religious side of this, okay? And look at stigmata objectively from a non-religious point of view. Stigmata to the non-religious are literally wounds and blood appearing on someone's body without any explanation or cause, which objectively is fucking weird and very scary. Like, if you just suddenly had these holes that were bleeding on your hands and feet, you'd be like, what the fuck is happening right now? I would freak out. Side note, I don't really have to be freaked out about it because it's said to happen to people with a life of heroic virtue, so I'm pretty sure I'm safe from this.
We all know where you're going.
Fuck you. So since you mentioned that, I debated about putting this in my script. I didn't, but I've decided that I'm just going to shoehorn this in here. So I once heard a joke.
Oh, no.
That I would like to now share with you folks. It is not dirty.
Okay.
There's no swearing in it. It is slightly sacrilegious, but it is overall funny. So you guys can use this if you want. You can be like, I didn't appreciate the joke. And again, I've given you the steps for how you can go ahead and share that. But here it goes. All right. So my friend that was religious told me this joke too. So I guess that means it's okay. So there's these 3 people in a boat in the middle of a lake.
Okay.
It is a guy named Bob. It is Moses, and it is Jesus Christ. And Bob says to Moses, hey, Moses, you know that thing where you parted the Red Sea with your staff? That was really cool. And Moses goes, well, thank you. It's been a long time, but I appreciate that. And Jesus is like, well, come on, Moses. You got your staff. We're on a lake. Just part the lake. Show him. And Moses is like, all right, all right. So he gets up, he takes his staff, and he taps the lake with it, and poof, it parts. And they're sitting on the bottom of the lake, and Bob goes, wow, that's cool. And Moses goes, thank you. So eventually the spell or whatever fades, and they're sitting on the lake again fishing. And Bob goes, hey, Jesus. And Jesus goes, yes. Bob goes, you know that thing where you walked on water? That was pretty cool. And Jesus goes, well, thank you. It's been a long time, but I appreciate that. Bob says, no problem. And then Moses goes, come on, Jesus. We're on a lake. You can walk on water. And Jesus is like, all right, all right. So he stands up, he takes a step off, and he falls right in the lake. And he's just drenched. So they reach over the boat, they pull him back in, and Bob goes, what happened, Jesus? And Jesus goes, the last time I did that, I didn't have holes in my feet.
Oh my God.
I love that. I love that joke so much, dude.
That's awful.
I don't think it's that awful, but I think it's a good litmus test about whether or not you're going to find this topic interesting.
Oh my God.
So let's get back to it. All right. What I want to do now is cover some folks who have supposedly had miraculous stigmata, where it comes out of nowhere. It's supposed to be something where they've been touched by God or an angel or some form of divinity. And then I want to cover some big fakers, some liars with their pants on fire. I should point out that although people outside of Catholicism have heard of stigmata, myself as an example, it is said that stigmata is, quote, exclusively associated with Roman Catholicism, end quote.
That is BS.
It sounds like gatekeeping to me.
Okay, you can't have something that is
only yours.
Only yours.
Yeah.
Right? If it is something that is supposed to be for, it's a holy thing that happens for people that live heroic lives and things like that. It could be anybody. It
shouldn't matter whether or not they're Catholics,
exactly.
Whether or not they could experience stigmata. That
I don't think there is like fine print that says, under like living a heroic life, the fine print doesn't say, and also Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Like that's not okay. You know what I mean?
I think what it really is to say is that stigmata is not something recognized by any other organized religion. It's something that's like known of, but it's not like on a checklist of things for divinity or touched by like God or like sainthood,
Okay.
But stigmata is one of those things that shows up when people are being canonized a lot. And I'll get to that later. But the first recorded stigmata in Christianity, aside obviously from the original.
What the fuck?
took place.
Oh my God.
Took place in 1224. And it was a dude named Francis. I love that name, by the way. From a place in Italy called Assisi. Francis was a very devout dude. He was a mystic Catholic friar. He was around 44 when he decided he was going to take a journey to a mountain. And he was going to do a 40-day fast. Fasting is something that, like, obviously Terry Crews does, intermittent fasting, where he, like, doesn't eat for 18 hours a day and eats for the other 8.
Okay.
But it's been around for a lot longer than Terry Crews. Fasting is something that's supposed to align you to Jesus, since he did that also during his time. He had a 40-day fast. So it's something that religious, especially in this case, someone who's very devout, decides they're going to do as a way for them to be closer to God, essentially. So very deep into his 40-day fast, it said that he was praying. And while he was praying, a 6-winged angel appeared to him and said,
"Eat something for fuck's sake, Jesus."
And then disappeared.
Why did you go? Okay.
He didn't
Tell me
actually
more.
say that. He saw him and, like, Francis was like, holy shit. Which he could say because he was a friar and all his shits were holy. So the angel, this is serious, the angel in the legend appears to have been crucified. So when Francis sees him, he's filled with like fear initially, and then the angel disappears and he's just overwhelmed with joy and happiness, but also with pain and suffering.
Aren't angels also supposed to be
Terrifying?
Absolutely horrifying?
Absolutely. They are 100% terrifying. They look nothing like Paul Bettany in Legion because he's how I identify everything in religion. So he sees this angel. Angel goes away. He's scared. He's happy. He's overwhelmed. He's in pain. He's suffering. And then wounds appear on his hands, his feet, and on his side, which is fucking crazy. I mean, objectively, it sounds like he was hallucinating from lack of food and may have injured himself. But there are supposedly a bunch of witnesses to him, like, seeing this angel and then all of a sudden having these wounds. And, you know, the marks fade away and he stops bleeding eventually. And then he goes on to live another 2 years. He passes away when he's 46. It said the marks returned after his death. Like the touch of the stigmata returned to him as something that's like, you know, just part of him as he goes on to the other world or whatever. And then another 2 years passes and he's canonized. He is turned into Saint Francis of Assisi. And it's a really quick process for this dude to become a saint because it typically takes a while. But this is one of the crazier things that I read is that the particular person who claimed that the marks returned to him upon his death was Pope Alexander IV, who also claimed to have been present or had witnessed his stigmata during his life when it was happening. So Francis is canonized super quick. And he's the first one. And there's like the Franciscan friars, the Franciscan Catholics that are still around today are directly from Saint Francis. They worship sort of like his teachings and things that happened to him, like in the way that people typically worship saints in Catholicism. So the next person I want to talk about, though, is a lady named Magdalena de la Cruz. She was around in the 1500s, so around 300 years later, and she was quite controversial. And this one is fucking weird. So she's born in 1487 and winds up being a Franciscan nun. Okay? She's following the same group that St. Francis basically started, following the teachings of Francis of Assisi. So basically what happens is Magdalena starts having stigmata and visions. And everyone's like, holy shit, she's touched by God. Then she starts telling folks, me and God talk all the time. Like on the regular, I can tell you guys what he wants you to know. And it's usually messages of peace and love and, you know, worship. And big groups start falling in line with her and speaking of her as a living saint, especially anyone who is part of the Franciscans at that time.
I feel like that's blasphemous.
At that point, it's like, well, she hasn't been canonized, so she's not a saint, and people are treating her like she's one. So it's causing some friction. So like any person who begins to have their own following or their own voice via connection with God, the church gets super nervous. The church and the Pope himself are the hierarchy built into Catholicism. You know, if you want to talk to God, you go through us. It's kind of the thing that goes on. It's the 1500s, and she's definitely challenging that. And there's a lot of people thinking this chick is sus as hell, including one dude who himself would go on to become a saint.
Some of the words you choose in the script, I'm like...
So when devotion and loyalty to her seem to waver, she has another vision or another prophecy, or another stigmata, or a message from God. And then 1546 hits, all right? This is where the story gets a little crazy. This is the story that exists, at least what I can find, and I'll get to why it's kind of sus in its own right. So 1546, Magdalena gets really, really sick, and she thinks she's going to die. And people are recounting her many stigmatas and her many miracles dating back to when she was 5 years old. At 5 years old, she was already known for being a super devout Christian. And when she's 5, she goes to church and she's praying by herself. And she looks up and she sees a man who seems to be exuding light, who has this big black beard. He has this long flowing hair. And he sits next to her and she continues to pray. And she looks up again and he's just gone. So she goes and she tells folks like, hey, someone came in there when I was praying and this is what he looked like and this is what happened. And all the folks like the big JC came to visit this girl. She gonna be special.
So, okay. This could also be a 5-year-old sociopath who finds...
all those 5-year-old sociopaths out there.
I'm sorry, but it could be something where she decides, if I do this, if I do these things, people will pay attention to me and I will be important, even if it's not real.
This is the first time where something happens, supposedly, and she becomes important. There's this other story of JC coming to her and asking her, basically like, hey, tone it the fuck down, dog. Because like the divinity she's trying to channel will burn her body out, and she has to do less, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She then runs to church.
To do less.
She then runs to church to pray, and she bumps into a dude who's always had a limp. And after she bumps into him, he can fucking walk again just fine. The limp goes away because she was just, talking to JC, and some of his awesome energy
This is just
rubbed off on her.
This is like putting someone in the crowd of a magic show and making it seem magical, but it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, come on.
So another story where she gets lost is from when she was still very young. She gets lost heading to church and winds up in a cave where she's trapped, but she feels the presence of God and she prays until she falls asleep. When she wakes up, she's in her own bed and she tells everyone, I was taken home by an angel. By the time she's 10 years old...
I'm sure it's like, by an angel named Emilio. Like, come on. Like,
by the time
dude, no.
By the time she's 10 years old, this is true, she decides, hey, it's Good Friday. I'm going to crucify myself. Her wounds get infected, and she seems as if she's on death's door. And then randomly, while she's very sick, she just sits up in bed and says, JC came to her, he healed her, and she's fine. And for all intents and purposes, she was. She got better, and she didn't fucking die. And that was when she was 10. She was born in like 1487 or something like that. But now she's sick for real. Let's jump back to the quote-unquote present. It's 1546. She's on her deathbed. Everyone's talking about like the miracle she's done, all this amazing stuff. She's 59 years old.
And now it's time for her to crucify herself.
Folks are like, you've lived this amazing life. You've silenced the haters. You've been a living saint. And Magdalena says, I faked all of it.
I knew it.
I am totally full of shit. All my stigmata, all my miracles. I made them up. I faked them all. I'm a fucking liar. And she says this because she's a fucking nun who thinks she's about to die. And because she's going to die with all this fraud, she's going to go to hell. And if she confesses on her deathbed, she gets to go to heaven. And people are like, oh, shit. Well, then I guess we're just a bunch of assholes for believing in you, huh? And then her doubters show up and they're like, aha! Like, we fucking knew it. And they start high-fiving around her deathbed and shit. And then guess what happens? The craziest part of the story, she gets better.
You know why?
She doesn't die.
She repents.
So they have to figure out what to do with her. She repented. She confessed. But now everyone knows she's a fraud. So she gets ordered to go to a new convent and told basically like, repent and gain redemption. It's the only way you're going to get into heaven. But here's the caveat to the whole story. This story takes place in Spain. And the historical account of her being a no-good scoundrel come from those who took her confession and the same folks who presided over her trial and ordered her sentence. And that's a group called the Spanish Inquisition, who were notorious fucking assholes, especially when it came to women challenging the church. So kind of hard to tell what to believe, because if this woman was actually a saint, actually touched by God, they still would have been challenged. Yeah. They still would have said she's full of shit. All that would have still happened. So it's like, who do you want to believe? Also, an interesting statistic. There's like, I get to the number later on in the script. There's like 300 and something recognized stigmata by the Catholic Church. 87% of them are women. So I do think that is kind of a staggering number. Like, that's a pretty big majority.
If the Da Vinci Code has taught me anything.
Oh my God. The Book of Da Vinci
if the Da
and
Vinci
his code
has taught me anything, the body of a woman is very important.
Obviously. So she's got a body like a battle axe. But
it's a chalice. Thank you very much.
My bad. Sorry. So in contemporary times, lots of folks have claimed to have stigmata. I remember there was a show on when I was younger called Sightings. It's like Unsolved Mystery, but specifically for paranormal or extraterrestrial type stuff. I've mentioned it on the show a lot. People who are my age are like, I totally remember Sightings. And they had a segment where they reported on a lady who was in Central America who was experiencing stigmata every year on Good Friday, which is, of course, the day Jesus gave everyone amazing deals on account of it being the day after Thanksgiving. So that's a joke, making fun of my mom, because my mom always mixes up Good Friday and Black Friday, and I always make fun of her for it.
I was just like, wait, what?
So anyways, they covered her having stigmata, like on Good Friday. They're like, hey, all the villagers say this happens to her. All her family says it happens to her. Happens every year on the day Christ was crucified. So eventually the viewers, after they cover her, like, this is incredible. We would love it if Sightings were to go there on the next Good Friday and record it so we can see that it's real. So Sightings goes down there the next year, and they do a follow-up episode later on, and they sit with her with all their cameras on her all day, all night. And at one point, she basically says, like, I need to be alone. And the next
Of
morning,
course.
she comes out, no stigmata, but she had a letter that she wrote after she said an angel spoke to her, or God spoke to her. I can't quite remember, and I can't find the episode. And it was all about treating each other better and making the world a better place and the things you'd expect a divine force to want from humanity. But the first step could have been not fucking lying to everyone who had believed in her, because it was clear at that point that the stigmata was made up. It wasn't going to happen again. They made it seem like, well, it's not going to happen because you guys want to see it now, and kind of like shamed everyone into like trying to make it into a spectacle by confirming it. And it was just like a big womp womp. And years later, it was revealed that she and her family had been faking it the whole time.
I knew it.
It's very frequent in these stories that I could tell you about stigmata that it's like, and in the end, it was confirmed to be fake. There's another dude that was in like the 1912s that I decided not to cover because he's very controversial, where he was canonized and then it was like rescinded because like a bunch of people came forward and they're like, I helped him fake his stigmata. And then they're like, they're just haters. Like they're just making this up to like try and like trash his divinity. And like, it's a big thing. And I'm like, I'm just not even going to go into that because I kind of want to go into one more thing before we wind up wrapping this up. Actually, a few more things. So there are 321 cases of stigmata that are acknowledged and accepted by the Catholic Church, but there are thousands upon thousands of people who claim to experience this. In most cases, if you're not Catholic, the Catholic Church refuses to recognize you're having a stigmata. You could have like all the things happen to you and have it completely unexplained, and they could confirm that you're not doing it to yourself. And if you're not Catholic, it seems like the Catholic Church would be like, it's not real stigmata because you're not Catholic.
Okay. People have to see the hypocrisy, right? Like,
depends. Like, it just depends on who you're talking to, really, when it comes down to it. It's like hard to separate like religious persecution from like trying to look at things objectively without offending people, which is what I'm trying to do on this thing. But realistically, when you hear that, you're like, well, if there was a confirmed case of stigmata, people would have heard about it, you know? And I've done a lot of scouring of the internet, and I cannot find any confirmed cases of stigmata. But there is one last case I want to touch on briefly before I wrap up. Despite this being associated with saints and individuals experiencing the touch of the divine, there's one other case I have come across. And there's probably more that I haven't come across, but one that I did come across that I do find very interesting. And there have been instances, very few and far between, but instances during exorcisms where possessed individuals supposedly exhibit stigmata. One of the most notable cases being the case of Annalise Michel, the actual person that inspired the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I covered her, I'm pretty sure with me, on episode 10, way back in the before 4 times. You would think that people who are being possessed and tormented by a demon, that totally makes sense for them to experience random wounds popping up on their hands and feet and bleeding and like mystery wounds that hurt you. Like that sounds like something that would be like a punishment.
right.
And not like a reward for like experiencing the divine. But now that we've gone through this thing and you've heard what stigmata is supposed to be, like, you know, you've been touched by the grace of God, basically. The idea that Annalise Michel was possessed and then experienced stigmata, knowing the rules of stigmata makes it significantly more creepy. Like this is a person who supposedly have lived a life of heroic virtue who's experiencing demonic possession. So when you hear about her stigmata, it puts it in a very different context.
What if it is more like the demons mocking what happened?
They shouldn't really, in the rules, which I don't know, this could all be fucking bullshit, people, but in the rules that supposedly exist, stigmata is something that comes from being touched by the divine. Like the demon could make you stab your hands and mimic it, but it can't just do that because that is something. It's like, okay, let me put it this way. Only the dark side has force lightning, okay?
Okay, got
the
it.
good side can't use it.
Okay.
So this would be like a demon using force heal and like, or the light side using force lightning. Just doesn't happen. I know Ray did it. Don't get fucking uppity with me.
Well, she's a gray Jedi, so it doesn't really even...
It's okay. We're going to get back to Annalise Michel on this one. But here's the thing about it, and this is why this is already a creepy case. There's lots of questions around this particular case, which is what the movie's about. Whether or not this is mental illness and improper treatment versus demonic possession. But that piece of it, the stigmata piece, it really feels like if there was some type of demonic possession and she experienced stigmata, that there was some sort of divinity trying to help. And it's like a tug of war between good and evil, and her being touched by the good piece trying to save her caused the stigmata. And it's really creepy to think about. It really is when you get into the details of her case and the way they tried to validate what happened to her in a court of law and basically say, like, we're going to try and justify, like, demonic possession and trying to prevent, like, the forces of evil from killing her. This is another detail that's really creepy to me when I like revisit that specific topic. And it came up a lot. And I went back to my old script from episode 10. I was like, this is creepy. Like, I've done a lot of possessions and not a lot of people. I couldn't find a lot of them that I wrote about that have experienced stigmata. I think I didn't find my script from the exorcism, the true story behind the exorcism. I think he also experienced stigmata, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But either way, it's really creepy when you know about stigmata and you add that detail into a possession. Because it's like, basically in a possession, when someone's exorcising, the person is like, you're asking God to intervene and to take this demon out of this person, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if they experience stigmata, it's almost like something's down there like, all right, let's fucking try and help now, you know?
Yeah.
And it adds this whole layer of things to me where I'm like, I get it. I understand the skepticism. I'm a skeptic myself. It just is one more piece to it where I'm like, now it feels like a little weird. It feels like both sides are kind of on the field playing at the same time, and like there's people appealing for help. And it was just one thing that when I was going through, I was like, this is creepy. It's giving me goosebumps. I'm definitely going to include it. So there's just no really way to tell like what's going on with this stuff. As I've shown in this particular episode, there's a lot of people who like to fake stuff for attention or for notoriety or for fame or for power. But I don't know. Spontaneously sprouting holes and spouting blood from them seems like something I would want to avoid. And if it only happens to like truly good people, I guess I probably will. But hey, you do you. And that, my spooky friends, is stigmata.
Thank you.
You're
Interesting.
welcome. I was very nervous about this topic, so I injected a lot of extra humor into it.
Hey, I went to Catholic school, so...
My dad was a Catholic. My mom was a Lutheran. I was raised with both of those religions in my life. I was very aware of a lot of things growing up, and the older I got, the more I researched and studied religion, especially in college. So it is not a foreign subject to me, and neither is how pissed off people can get if you tell them one slight detail that's different from what they heard. So hopefully no one gets upset, and if you do, well, I guess at Robin. So
Don't at me.
All right, so before we move into our next topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
All right. Welcome to the less, I guess, controversial half of the episode. So last week was a bit of a rough episode. I know I covered that cult. You covered some true crime. It was a lot. It was rough.
It was.
At least in my opinion, it was a lot of true crime. It was a lot of crime in the true crime department.
Usually there's a lot of true crime department.
This one had a lot of crime. This week, I thought I'd take a couple steps back from the intensity of that cult madness and cover something a little more paranormal, a little bit more mysterious. I know Adam definitely went into the complete opposite direction.
I doubled down on the cult madness.
From true crime. And, you know, because it's me, it still has to have a little bit of that true crime element to it, right? So this week, I'm going to be telling you about the mysterious death of Christopher Case. And this one takes place not too long ago. I say that, but not too long ago is the 90s.
That's not too long ago. I was alive that entire decade.
I was alive. I was also alive that entire decade, but it's almost the 30s again.
Yep, sure. No. It's 23.
That's still, almost the 30s.
No, it's not. The people that are 23 and they're like, I'm almost 30,
think
should
about
be
it.
punched in the throat.
Think about it.
Fuck you, man.
That's true. Okay, no, but think about it, okay? It's 2023. 7 years. It'll be 30s.
Yeah.
We've been doing this show for 5 years.
That's correct.
And time has gone by real quick.
Yep.
So before we know it, it'll be the 30s.
If we're still doing this in 2030, I think that'll be quite a feat. Or a massive failure. It's really hard to tell.
No! Okay. Anyway, so I can't. On April 18th, 1991, Christopher Case, a 35-year-old former radio broadcaster, was found dead in the bathtub of his Seattle apartment. The condition in which he was found and the strange things that kind of surround the incident are what make this death really creepy and interesting. Christopher Robert Case was born August 8th, 1955. He had moved from Raleigh, North Carolina to Seattle, Washington.
It's a long ways. That's East Coast to West Coast.
He was raised in Virginia, too, I think. He was born in Richmond, Virginia. So he's traveled all over. I mean, I say all over, but that's not too many places. But not sure exactly when he moved from North Carolina to Seattle. It's not important when. But he began working as a music executive at this Seattle-based company named Muzak Holdings. Muzak.
Okay.
By all accounts, he was fairly well liked. People weren't going around and talking smack about him or anything. What they did have to say, though, was that despite him being a pretty chill dude, something started going a little bit off. All of a sudden, he changed, got a little quirky. He had a good job, he was making good money, and he seemed like he was happy with his life. And I say seemed because I don't know. I don't know him, but that's just what I found on the interwebs, guys. So he could have been miserable the whole time, and his happiness was a facade. I can't say. But what it seems like is that during the month of April 1991, his friends started picking up on some really strange vibes. So his friends reported that they started getting a series of strange phone calls from Case. And with each phone call, he seemed to get noticeably more scared or frightened of something. And he would be speaking of a curse and that a quote-unquote witch was out to get him.
For all the witches out there, don't add us. We're just telling a story.
We're just telling you.
We understand that's not how witches work.
He would claim that she was attacking him with some sort of supernatural powers and spells. One of his friends from Fayetteville, North Carolina, Sammy Soder, who also happens to be a psychic, would go on to speak about one of these such messages that she received. Quote, he said, "They're after me. I'm very, very afraid, extremely afraid. I could die from this." He said he was afraid and that the witch had been attacking him all night and cutting him. He said he'd woke up with little cuts on the ends of his fingers, end quote. So it was a big deal for him. And
Fuck yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, for him to contact her and tell her this and like probably really panicked voice, you know, he's terrified and these weird things are happening to him and I'm sure she's terrified. And if she's a psychic, I'm sure she's like, she has bad feelings about what is going on, right? So he would call different friends, frantically sharing these same concerns. And he just seemed to get more and more paranoid and more terrified. And he would say things like he only had one more week to live. Those are the types of things that he would say. And naturally, the people in his life were really worried about him. What made his statements about a witch even more strange is that those that knew him knew he had never expressed any interest in the paranormal like this before. It just was not in his wheelhouse. So these sudden wild claims had his friends really concerned about his mental health and where he was mentally, because how could he have changed so drastically? What could have happened that made him completely change what his beliefs were, right? And why was he so scared? And why was he absolutely obsessed with his death all of a sudden?
Right.
So on April 18th, 1991, he didn't show up for work, which is always a bad sign. He never answered his cell phone. Well, it's 1991. Do they have cell phones?
They do, but they're not as common at that point.
He never answered his phone, let's say. So he never answered his phone despite the number of calls he was getting. And immediately, this was seen as a red flag considering how often he'd been calling his friends up until this point. So there was a growing concern that led his friends to get the police involved. So his friend Sammy called the police and wanted them to go perform a wellness check on him, which I I don't think is something out of the ordinary. If I had somebody who I was really concerned about, I would do the same thing.
I've had to have wellness checks performed on like multiple people in the past where like they're non-responsive and you're worried about them. You just want to make sure they're okay. And obviously I have a brother who's cray-cray, so sometimes you have to have them check them out and make sure that they're hanging in there.
So when police arrived at the Seattle apartment, they found the door locked and no one answered. It's thought that something happened that frightened him so much that he stayed at a hotel that day. And so this is where it kind of gets confusing. Like, did she call on the 18th when he didn't show up for work, or did she call before that? There are so many different sources and lots of different dates, and it gets really confusing. But that day that the police showed up, whichever day it was that they ended up going, the door was locked. And so it's thought that that day he had stayed at a hotel because something scary really happened to him and he didn't want to go home. So the next morning, on the 17th, supposedly, gets really confusing, it's reported that Sammy had received a message on her answering machine, because 1991, they had answering machines.
They did.
That stated that it was from Case, and it said that he had almost died, like it had almost gotten him. And so this was going to be his last day on Earth.
Wow.
So 2 others heard from him that day, a Catholic priest and the manager of the religious bookstore that he had been going to buy all his religious paraphernalia for all of these things that are happening to him. So police returned the next day after still no word from Case. So this then would be the 18th.
Okay.
So on this second visit, they actually found the door to the apartment unlocked. So they let themselves in and came across what everyone was hoping wasn't true. So Christopher Case was found dead in his empty bathtub.
Wow.
So he was fully clothed and kneeling in what has been described as a prayer position. So on your knees,
right,
kind of thing. Have you been to Catholic church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tons of times.
So you know how you take the thing on the back of the pew and you put it on it? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, so his head would be, he was kneeling, prayer position, head was resting against the wall. There were no signs of a struggle. There were no visible injuries. He was just kind of there, but dead. And some describe it as him having been scared to death. That's what it seemed like. And he was surrounded by quite an interesting scene. So he was surrounded by 10 or so burnt out candles. So they had been going all night, probably. There were crucifixes that were strewn about as well. When talking to neighbors, it said that there may have been some sort of religious music that was playing at some point from his apartment. Police continued to search the apartment, and throughout their search, they couldn't find any sign of robbery or any sort of foul play. It just all seems very weird. And they find amulets, they find crucifixes, and what has been described as quote-unquote arcane talismans, other people's words, not mine. Along the bases of all the walls and door frames were carefully placed lines of salt.
Wow.
So along all those, there's salt. At the entryway of the apartment, there's seemingly strange geometric pattern drawn with salt as well. And I say seemingly strange because it could be, something straightforward, but it's
could have
strange.
Been an archaic rune. It could have been a dick. You don't know.
Right. So some say that there was even salt at the windows. So any entrance, anything, there was a line of salt there. Among Case's belongings were numerous books on witchcraft, black magic, the occult, etc. They also found letters that made the situation even more strange than it already was. So in these letters, Case goes on to describe events that lead up to this point. So according to Case, he had recently gone on a trip to San Francisco, California, where he meets a woman who claims to be an expert on Egyptian music.
Okay.
They hit it off right away. I assume he was there for work or something, because music, he worked at the music industry.
Muzak.
Anyway, he finds her really interesting. because his hobby is actually ancient music. He's really into ancient music. So the fact that she's into ancient Egyptian music, just right up his alley. So they strike up solid conversation, and according to Case, she makes a pass at him.
Okay.
He politely refuses her advances due to his being either unnerved by her, one source says, or that he was much older than her in another one. It just varies. Either way, we know he said no to her. And she, of course, gets upset and then goes on to claim that she is a witch and continues on to threaten him and tell him that she is going to put a curse on him. Another source I read said that she was like, "You'll be dead in 7 days," or something like that. But
and she crawled through his TV.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time,
I think I read a source where she sang a song that said, "I put a spell on you."
And now you're mine. But he is obviously not hers. So at the time, he didn't believe in any of these witchcraft things. He didn't believe in any of this. He just found all of it to be really creepy and really unsettling. Like, who is this person? She's insane. Upon his return, his mind completely changed. So he became more and more convinced that she was indeed a witch and that there really was a curse on him. He claimed that strange things started happening within his home. So one of the sources I read said that he got home for the first few days. He totally forgot that it even happened. He's like, yeah, whatever. And then weird stuff starts happening and he starts like believing in it more and more. So in his letters, he describes seeing shadow figures walking around his apartment and how he would wake up with bruises and unexplainable cuts on his body.
Fuck.
One of the messages or phone calls, I think he even said that he found bloodstains on the sheets or stuff like that. He felt like the only way to understand what was going on and to protect himself was to read more about the occult and kind of get an understanding, right? He even went so far as to look for professional help for his problem. Things escalated. And they escalated to the point where he just didn't feel safe in his own home. He would spend a lot of time out and at hotels, which is probably why he was at a hotel that night when the police came to check on him that first time. And he was afraid that the dark magic kind of lingered within his home, and he couldn't sleep at night. He said that he would hear footsteps as if someone was watching him. So, I mean, I would definitely not want to go home if that were me. If any of that stuff happened, I'd be like, fuck this, I am outie. Like, no, I cannot. That's awful.
It's a shame he didn't have anyone he could go to and be like, can I stay at your place?
The hard part is he left home, right? He left home, moved to Seattle.
Just finding someone that you could like go to, that maybe you could be like, can I come over and like we can hang out? Maybe I can like take a nap in the same room as you, and you can just like hang out and make sure like there's no shadow people trying to poke me with anything.
Yeah, I don't know, but like one of the sources I saw said that he would be single because he's always traveling for work. So because doesn't have a stable, place to stay for long periods of time, he's always working, he's always busy, he's always doing whatever. He was just alone, most of the time, which is sad, but the life of a hard worker, right? He was
married to his job.
Yeah. So authorities felt that the emotions in the letter were genuine, that he actually felt these things. And they felt that he truly meant it when he said he felt threatened and in danger. So continuing on in the investigation, during the autopsy of Case's body by Rich Garner, who is the medical investigator at King County Medical Examiner's Office, it was found that the cause of death was acute myocarditis. So that is inflammation and damage to the heart. So that can cause chest pain, shortness of breath, irregular heart rhythm, etc. And it's life-threatening if left untreated. Yeah. What's odd about death by heart damage / heart attack / you get the idea with this,
right?
Is that he was really young. He was 35. And he was really fit and for all intents and purposes, healthy. He was kind of like a gym rat. And he lived a clean lifestyle. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. Supposedly, I don't know him personally. And his family had no issue or no history of heart issues. So it's not something genetic that he had. And the tox screen that they didn't seem to come back with anything out of the ordinary, as there are no news outlets that have made a point to add that into their reports. So he was a person who took vitamins and stuff all the time. He was just like a health nut. And
I like that we refer to anyone who takes vitamins as a health nut.
I mean, I'm sure I'm getting to that age where I'm like, I gotta take vitamins, dude.
I take a multivitamin here and there. I'm getting pretty healthy.
I'm a health nut. Okay, so with how he was found, he just didn't seem to have been doing any strenuous activity. He was found kneeling in a bathtub. It was like he was doing some sort of ritual because, again, he was surrounded by a bunch of candles, crucifixes, things like that. And then it just hit him and he died, right? It was mere days after his paranoia began.
Wow.
Because of the strange circumstances of his death and the sudden onslaught of heart damage, it's been theorized that it had something to do with the possible dark curse or magic that was like placed on him by this angry San Franciscan. And
you don't know she's from San Francisco. Let's not put it on the city.
I mean, okay, he met her there. She's not necessarily from there, but you get what I mean.
I mean, it literally also could be like he stressed himself so severely that he died. Like it's something where everyone knows that stress can affect your physical health. It's just shocking how quickly his health deteriorated in several days.
Yeah.
From like, I mean, if you're at the point where you're absolutely terrified, it has, significant trauma placed on your body. Like that's what post-traumatic stress disorder is.
Which is funny. I literally just talked to my older sister about this today. Because, my mom is dealing with health issues right now and she's thinking like she has all this pent up emotion. My mom has all this pent up emotion and stress and things like that. And it's starting to take a toll on her physically.
Yeah. When you bottle stuff up like that, like I think that about people who are constantly angry, or like are always experiencing drama or finding some reason to be stressed about something that's like always just sort of like internalized. Mm-hmm. Like it legitimately has a physical effect on you.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah, 100% is.
All right. So throughout the investigation, it was clear to police that prior to this, he had no interest in witches or anything paranormal or any of that kind. He was fairly rational and level-headed. I mean, he professional music executive, right? He's not focused on all of this paranormal activity stuff. But this sudden change in ideals and personality was really concerning and off-putting to those that knew him and were getting these really frantic calls. And so what makes this death such a mystery is this weird change and how he could flip a switch so suddenly. And how did he die the way that he did?
Right.
Because the pose that he was found in is really odd and creepy. Why was he kneeling in his bathtub like that? Why did he light a bunch of candles around him? You know what I mean? What was he doing? It's just very, very strange. And the fact that he had put salt at all of the crevices, all the entryways, all the openings, it's just very weird. And this is before Supernatural ever aired, right? 1991. So it's not like... I
mean, salt circles and salt barriers have been around for longer than Supernatural.
I know, but like, it's not like he was inspired by the Winchesters to do it, right? But we still have no idea who this mystery woman is. No one knows if she actually existed. No one knows who she is, if she existed. Again, like you were saying, it could have been a self-fulfilling prophecy because he stressed himself to death. He made his heart race so much with the fear that he gave himself a heart attack.
Right.
If that could be it. I don't know.
I mean, like, if you've ever seen someone that, like, not just people that are like, oh, I'm so stressed out, but someone who's, like, in the throes of, like, an anxiety attack or a panic attack, they think they're going to die in a lot of cases. Like, that is one of the symptoms of, like, having a panic attack is, like, you think you're having a heart attack, you think you're going to die, and, like, having that sort of stress and thinking I'm going to have another panic attack or I'm going to have a heart attack leads to that, it just builds and builds and builds and builds. So being this afraid, thinking I'm going to die constantly is something that I think I have some familiarity with, and some people that have experienced anxiety, and especially in massive levels, have some like experience with as well. But it is one of those mysteries where all of the things that he did, like to see someone that like spirals. And I've seen it a couple of times in like friends who were upset about a specific thing where they just kept like freaking out and they wouldn't calm down. And it's like, they're not just putting on a show. They're not just saying stuff like repeatedly because they want attention. Like sometimes you get like latched onto an idea. I think the best example I can give you is people that like dig too deep on like WebMD and shit.
Yeah.
And they like one symptom like shows up on like a chart that tells you have some horrible disease. And then you start going through all these other fucking diseases you could have. You become convinced that you have all these diseases and you're going to die. And it's like, dude, you stubbed your toe, And it's something where it could have been there was an inciting incident where there was a chick that was, rebuked, and she was upset about it. And she was just like, I put a spell on you. And he was just like, he became convinced he was going to die. And then the spiraling in 1991 was a lot harder because you don't have Google. But he like got so in his own head and he started buying all those books and he's just surrounded by nothing but that stuff that it just perpetuated itself until it happened. Or you put a curse on him and he fucking died.
I mean, maybe. It could be either or, right? But supposedly, between his meeting this mystery woman and his death, it was exactly 7 days. Not to say this totally has The Ring vibes, but this totally has them Samara vibes, okay? I totally, when I saw that it was 7 days, I'm like, 7 days?
I'm shocked you didn't say that behind me. Because you'll say it randomly during the day, like apropos of nothing. So the fact that you didn't say it, good job.
Yeah, I have watched all the Ring movies, all the Grudge movies.
Have you watched Ringu?
I think I've watched parts of it, but not the whole thing.
It's incredibly similar.
Is it?
I think I don't know, I haven't watched The Ring in a long time, but there's like a part in Ringu that bothered me that I'm not sure is replicated in Ring, so we'll have to check it out.
What part?
It's like one of the characters like spontaneously gets psychic powers to like cover up a plot hole.
Oh.
And I was just like, that's some fucking lazy writing right there.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right. Also, if you guys like The Grudge, Ju-on Origins on Netflix, pretty good. It's Japanese, but like still good if you are okay with reading subtitles. Anyway, so Christopher Case is now buried in Chesterfield, Virginia, at Dale Memorial Park.
So he made his way back across the country last time.
Yep.
It's very sad. It's very creepy.
It's very creepy.
Excellent research, right?
I don't know. We'll never know what happened. There's no cameras there to show us, what steps he took, or all we have are these letters that he wrote before he died. And it's just strange.
And very, very, very creepy. 100%.
Yeah.
So, it is sad he didn't have someone to reach out to. Like, there's this thing that I learned at work, like very early on in any career I've ever had, where it's like, take a partner. Like, if you're having a hard time, like you need advice on something, like reach out to someone who's your peer or even a superior or maybe even a subordinate or whatever you call them, direct reports, and just take a partner and run it by them and see what they think and see if they can help. And that feeling of isolation when you're really, really scared is difficult. That's why I literally always like to say, when we say, you can reach out to us, it doesn't have to be about what we covered. It doesn't have to be something you want us to read on the show. You can just reach out to us to like ask us a question or tell us something is happening. We have gotten emails like that, and I want to reiterate that is the case. Like, if you're experiencing something weird and you just need someone to like tell you everything's okay, or tell you like other things it could be that you might have thought, but you just need to hear come from someone else or anything like that, like you can absolutely reach out to us. And if you get into a case where it's like something is legitimately scary happening and you don't know who to reach out to and you wind up reaching out to us, like there's only so much we can do, but we won't make you feel like you're alone, Yeah. And I feel like that's the worst part of this story to me. The scariest part is like this person was terrified and they were alone. And that sucks.
Yeah.
And that's the worst part of that story, aside from the fact that he died.
Yeah, it's sad because all his friends were back home, right? And it's they can't do anything all the way from
Just
North
took
Carolina.
one friend to fly out and be like, dude, it's okay. Come back to the East Coast. Maybe the spell won't travel that far and see what happened. But who knows? Might have happened anyways.
And we'll never know.
Yeah. But it was an excellent topic.
Thank you.
Good job, Robin.
I thought it was fascinating.
What is the name of the Ring prequel? I forget. You already said it once, but say it one more time.
The
That's
Ring
on Netflix.
Prequel? Oh, that's for The Grudge.
Oh, the Grudge prequel. What's the name of that?
Ju-on.
Ju-on.
Yeah.
And that's on which streaming
Netflix.
service? Okay, cool. I would also like to say it's excellent. I would check it out if I were you and you wanted to see something that's horror related.
Yeah, do own Origins.
Prequel,
it's scary.
Prequel stuff. And like Robin said, if you are okay with reading subtitles, let's be real. Like just about everyone puts subtitles on English
Oh
stuff.
my god, I know.
So like, what the fuck is the difference? Like, just put on something where you actually can't understand the language and it won't matter. So, but yeah, check that out. It's very good and yeah, good shit.
Thanks.
So I think that's just about everything we have for episode 256 of Scaryish. It's been a really fun January Patreon push, so thank you all for those of you who signed up. And those of you who can't, we understand. We appreciate the support that we get just from you listening or sharing it with a friend or family member. It's always nice to see new people come into the channels and pick up the podcast and reach out and say, like, I just picked up the show, I'm binging it now. It's always just really fun and exhilarating to see new people come on, and it's been a really good month so far. So we hope to carry that momentum into 2023 and continue bringing you guys topics. So, anyways, if you have anything you want to talk to us about, you want to reach out to us about a story, feel free to email storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com. Click on contact us, fill out that form that comes directly to us, or hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod, and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations with tiers starting at $1 for quarters. You can also go to ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. And those are one-time donations if you're not into the monthly subscription type thing. So, yeah. Any support is greatly appreciated, even if it's just sharing us with your friends or family and forcing them to listen to us on car rides. But thank you so much, everyone, for always being there for us and helping the show get this far.
Indeed. We appreciate every bit of support we've gotten from you folks, and we're going to keep bringing you the content for as long as we can. So
yay.
That is everything we have for episode 256. So Robin, go ahead and use our sign out and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Also, keep on creeping on TM. Bye-bye.